Hello everyone. GBLD 505, Assignment 1, Dr. Wendy Rao and Dr. Wanda Kraus. This presentation is to share with you a comparative cultural value analysis between Japan and Canada. I have had a particular interest in Japan for a number of years now because of my practice in the traditional martial art of Aikido, which has its roots in Japan, and the relationship I have with a few friends born and raised in Japan but now living in Canada. Additionally, my family of Dutch European background has only lived in Canada for the last 15 years, and as such it seems valuable to review Canada as part of this comparative analysis as well. Japanese history and culture. As described by JapanGuide.com website, the Japanese history is rich and long, dating back to 13,000 BC. And is earmarked by what is called periods, often related to the reign of emperors. The first period, up to 710 AD, is about the early settlements and the establishment of the organized living and agriculture on the Japanese archipelago. The Nara and Heian period is from about 710 before AD to about 1185 AD. And it sees the development of the Japanese-centric government in Nara, and the capital moves to Heian, today also known as Kyoto. The first emperors were from military families, and they would appoint a shogun, head military leader. The Kamakura period, 1185 to 1333, sees a further development of the Japanese culture and a more militaristic approach, with the appointment of a new shogun to the further Japanese sovereignty, law, and tax regulations. The Zen sect is introduced as part of Buddhism and a means to strengthen one's mind and spirit by meditation, which was adopted early by the shogunate as a means to strengthen their warriors, the samurai. The Muromachi period, 1338 to 1573, is in particularly interested as the first Europeans, Portuguese at the time, made contact in 1542 and introduced firearms and Christianity. The Edo period, 1603 to 1868, is important to recognize that it was a time when much of what we relate to Japan's history, the martial arts, the shogunate developing during this time, the government established in Edo, Tokyo. During the Edo period, a long peaceful time of nearly 250 years, emphasizes its place in the study of the samurai in literature, philosophy, and the arts. For example, paper puppet shows with backlight called kabuki, and the woodblock printing, ukiyo-e. The country was closed for foreigners except for a new trade agreement with the Netherlands, China, Korea, but flourished in its domestic trade and agriculture. Christianity was outlawed. Important for this period to consider is, as quoted by the JapanGuide.com website, that the most important philosophy of Tokugawa Japan was Neo-Confucianism, stressing the importance of morals, education, and hierarchical order in the government and society, which still prevails today. The Meiji period, 1868 to 1912, is dominated by a number of wars, as is the Taisho period from 1912 to 1926, when Japan joined the Allied forces in World War I. However, in the Showa period, 1926 to 1998, Japan surrendered from the Pacific War after the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. A new constitution is promulgated, and Japan is currently in what they call the heist period. Japan has a rich and long history dating back to before 710 AD and can be appreciated as a strong masculine society. The people of Japan have deep respect for tradition and adherence to cultural norms and values. Their history has been informed by many years of development as a people with a culture that has strong roots in Buddhism and Shinto religions. Japanese people tend to be polite and harmonious, family-oriented, which is evident by their long history of family rule, but they are risk-adverse. Japanese people have a process for many things, and it is expected that tradition is upheld and adhered to. As such, there is a difference between a first encounter, meeting an elder, conversations with parents or business partners, strangers, or those that you've actually known a lot longer. Japanese language has a polite form called keigo, which is used to address superiors, parents, and strangers. The long history of inclement weather, earthquakes, tsunamis, and other related emergencies has made Japan a significant planning state. Not much is left to chance, and change has to be brought in mindfully for the correct. According to the website Hofstede Insights, the Japanese people have a strong masculine society, already mentioned, a strong uncertainty avoidance, and long-term orientation, which means that the people in Japan work hard today for a future maybe not their own. A long history of military order through the emperor and the shogunate, and the introduction of Neo-Confucianism in the Edo period have ingrained the Japanese people with order and tradition. On the Cultural Atlas website, it's mentioned that 98% of Japanese people share the same ethnicity, making it one of the most homogeneous societies in the world. Combined with a shared sense of being, with a common heritage, history and culture contributes to their belonging to a people, a group, and to a collectivistic culture. More than 1,000 years of Buddhism and Shinto religion practiced by at least 67% of the population strongly influences the importance of harmony with people, nature, and the world around. Over the many years, Japan continues to steer a route that it considered of a variety of risks, albeit social, economical, or environmental. And as such, Japan is known for some of the best earthquake management systems, tsunami alarm systems, and safest high-speed trains in the world. Canadian history and culture. Although North America has been home to Indigenous peoples for many thousands of years, Canada is a very young country. Its recorded history only dating back a few hundred years, fraught with dualism between settlers and First Nations people, between the colonial French and English, and later with the Americans. Although most of Canada experiences the English influence, strong French-European influences in Eastern Canada continue to fuel conversations about separation and division today. As a young country, independent from Britain, it is still struggling with its place in the world. However, the post-World War II boom in economic growth, the significant immigration of people into Canada from all over the world, and the strong role Canada has played in peacekeeping has made Canada a well-respected and sought-after country to live in. According to the Business Insider website and a 2017 UN report, Canada ranks in the top 10 of Canada's people's core values. According to the book Culture Shock by Pang and Barlas, 2012, as well as the website The Canadian Guide, the first peoples of Canada are its Aboriginal peoples, living throughout Canada, who came across the Bering Land Bridge as early as 20,000 BC. Aboriginal peoples have lived in what is now called Canada in peaceful settlements and have been systematically displaced by the settlers and British colonialists. First Nations people are predominantly a matriarchal society. However, most of Canada can be considered a modern masculine society, with lots of value placed on that of individual success. The early settlers and immigrants were often left to their own devices to obtain success. As described on the website by Hofstede Insights, Canadians are also more prone to show direct styles of communication, look to take initiative and be self-reliant. Canada's recent history includes many changes, and Canadians are used to change. For example, many being immigrants themselves. Overall, Canadians are comfortable with the concept of change and accept other opinions and ideas. Freedom of speech is important, and the basic rights and freedoms have been well established in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, 1982. The years of conflict and duality within Canadian history has informed a strong value of live and let live. Canadians are proud and value their independence. History and the early experiences of colonialism have contributed to an overall individualistic approach to life. Canadians are polite but will remain cautious at first contact. This can also be said of Aboriginal people, the loss of trust in newcomers. Over the years, the huge amount of influx of people from all over the world to Canada, to name a few, the British, French, Chinese, African, American, European countries, and those particularly after the First and Second World Wars, has contributed to a truly heterogeneous population, often referred to as the Canadian mosaic. The post-war boom contributed significantly to Canada's economic growth and population growth. Comparative analysis in general. The history of Canada and its geographical hugeness contributes to a fragmented growth, where the many different geographical areas influence its people differently. For example, many Canadians live near the 49th parallel, the border. According to the website, the Population Review, approximately 87%. It is difficult to pin down what true Canadian values are, but history and culture form an assumption. On the other side, Japan's long history and defined culture helps us understand their unique differences better. This comparative analysis will show the most divergent of values, traditions, and ceremonies and practices, but not the uniqueness of a person-to-person interaction. This comparative analysis highlights the following: an individualistic Canada versus a collectivistic Japan, a heterogeneous Canada versus a homogeneous Japan. Japan is much more masculine society. Japan is risk adverse, where Canada is risk tolerant. Japan seeks harmony, where in Canada duality is pretty common. Direct communication is common in Canada, but indirect communication preferred in Japan. Japan is a very hierarchical society, whereas in Canada hierarchy is recognized as part of society and part of the jobs, but not so much in its layered society. And then the strong difference between the Buddhist and the Christian mainstream religions, Christianity in Canada. In conclusion, Canada and Japan are widely different. Their histories alone show how unique these two countries are. Canadian people come from all over the world, making Canadian society coined as the Canadian mosaic. A Canadian would have to show restraint when in Japan, being mindful of their values and traditions, recognizing the group, hierarchy, and indirectness as a means of mainstream communication. Respect, honor, politeness, and general mindfulness will go a long way when in Japanese company. Being aware of what Buddhism and Shinto religion bring to daily life, related to ritual, tradition, and overall sense of being, will help interpersonal communication, as well as how Christianity informs daily values in the majority of Canadian culture. A Japanese person in Canada could find it hard to ground themselves in Canadian culture. Canadian tolerance for change, a live and let live, non-conformity attitude, combined with an individualistic approach, are widely opposing experiences for Japanese people. We could come across as less restrained and controlled, adding to the experience of discomfort and disconnect. The next generation of both Canadian and Japanese young people are more open-minded. I hope you have enjoyed this very short presentation on the comparative analysis between the Japanese and Canadian peoples, their histories, backgrounds, cultures, values, and what stands out for us most when we consider our interaction.